Hello, welcome to Lecture 7 in Texas History. This is Chapter 19, Cattle and Cotton. And in today's lecture, we're going to pick up with Roman numeral 2 in your notes, the big ranches. If you have your textbooks, you can turn to page 484. We'll be going through page 486 in today's lecture. Now, the big ranches, some of which you might have read already in your textbooks, that would be the King Ranch. You had the XIT Ranch. Those are the two main ones that we'll be talking about today. But before we pick up with specific ranches, I want to talk about the railroad's impact on livestock and the cattle drives specifically. And I mentioned this a little bit in Lecture 6, but we're going to go over it in your notes here. The railroads come to Texas, letter A. So in the 1880s, railroads were finally extending into Texas. And so what this means is that now cattle owners or ranch owners are now able to drive their cattle only short distances to maybe Fort Worth, which was a major livestock city, but also it's where railroads came through, intersecting that city so that they could drive their cattle to Fort Worth, bring them to the stockyards there, load them up, and send them to the meat packing industries or the slaughterhouses. Well, that was one impact on the cattle drive, in that now cattle drivers aren't having to travel such long distances from point A to point B. If we look back at some of these cattle drives here, these trails, you had the Goodnight Loving Trail off to the west. You had the Western Trail, you had the Chisholm Trail and the Shawnee Trail. And look how long these trails are. It's thousands of miles, some of them. And so with the introduction of the railroads into Texas, we see that it shortens these cattle drives. But another innovation was the refrigerated railroad car. Whenever there was no refrigerated railroad car, cattle owners or ranch owners would have to drive their cattle to the nearest railroad station. They would be loaded up live, by the way, onto the railroad cars and then taken to slaughterhouses, which were located next to meat packing centers in Chicago, New York, and the major cities along the East Coast. Now that there was the invention of the refrigerated railroad car, which means keeping items in these railroad cars frozen, now you're able to go ahead and slaughter these cattle from a shorter distance, slaughter them, pack them onto the railroad cars in the refrigerated ones, and then send them to the East Coast and even to Europe without spoiling. So the refrigerated railroad car really put an end to the long cattle drives. Now, what did ranch owners do now that there was no cattle drive? Does that mean that they stopped ranching? Absolutely not. Now they were able to hold all of their cattle on vast amounts of land, but instead of just keeping them on the open range and then gathering them for the cattle drives, they now just fence in their land, keeping their cattle in one location. So some of the major ranches, I mentioned the King Ranch earlier. That was started by Richard King. But after he died, it was his wife, Henrietta King, who took over the ranch and grew it to over 1 million acres with over 100,000 head of cattle. The biggest ranch, though, in Texas was the XIT Ranch, and this ran along the border of New Mexico and Mexico itself. And the XIT Ranch was about 3 million acres. The owners of the XIT Ranch were able to receive these acres through a land grant. Now, I know what you're thinking. They just received this land for free? Not the case. So what we see here with the XIT, the owners of the XIT, they received 3 million acres in exchange for giving monthly installments or monthly payments to the Texas government. The Texas government would take this money and then they would use it towards building their new capital in Austin. And notice the word capital there, it's with an O, meaning the Capitol building itself. And so those were the two major ranches, the King Ranch and the XIT Ranch, which I want to fix here. It was located along the Panhandle in New Mexico, not along the border of Mexico itself. And so we're going to talk about in our next lecture actual fencing of property. Why did that come about? Who came up with the invention of barbed wire? And you're going to figure all of that out, and you're going to find all of it out whenever you do your reading assignment. Your reading assignment is to read pages 486 to 491, and then there will be a reading assessment. It's entitled Reading Assessment 2 in your classwork tab, and there's a Google form there that you can fill out and submit to me, and that will be a completion grade. This lecture is to be watched on Friday, March 27th. The reading assignment or assessment is due at the end of Monday by 11:59 p.m., so make sure you get that done. One more announcement is that you also have a quiz on Tuesday. That quiz on Tuesday will cover, or the information on it will cover all of the lectures that we will have had so far in Chapter 19. So that would be Lecture 6, 7, and 8. Okay, so Lectures 6 through 8 is what your quiz will cover there. And, of course, make sure you study your notes. Also, hopefully you've been able to see the test boost there. The test boost is something that all junior high teachers are going to be doing. We may do it a little bit differently than one another. However, the purpose of this test boost is the same all the way around. It's to answer those questions that we think are extremely important that you've been quizzed and tested over. And if you could successfully complete that test boost, then you will receive half credit. Meaning, if you got a 90 and you finish that test boost, you'll get a 95. If you got an 80, okay, then you complete that test boost, you'll get a 90 on the test. All right, so that's how that's going to work. If you've received 100 on your test, then please do not take the test boost because you will not be able to make over 100, and that'll just be one more test boost that I'll be having to look at. I think that's all of the announcements, except I do want to read a couple of these. I'm going to read the results of the poll. What superpower do you want most? And if I've already gone over this, then you can turn this off, but I don't think I have just yet. All right, so this is Texas history. This is third period here. And here are the comments. Invisibility, super speed, flight, invisibility, teleportation, freezing time, invisibility, reading minds. And I was not surprised by this answer. When I saw his name pop up, I knew this is going to be an interesting answer. It said, knowing how to be a normal person. That's a pretty good one. Super speed, and then super smarts. So I would just know everything. Then we have in fourth period Texas history. Let's see here. Got 10 comments from this one. Invisibility, super speed, change the future, teleportation, fly, invisibility. I don't know how to describe them, but Loki's powers, okay? Manipulate the speed of time's flow. Very fancy wording there. Invisible, or invisibility. The power to make food cook quicker in the microwave. That's a pretty good one. Let's see. And then finally, we have sixth period. Let's see. Maybe I passed it here. Here we go. Control time, invincibility, mind control, shapeshift. Now, I don't know if that's like Maui from Moana shapeshifting, or like you shape into like, I don't know. Interesting though. Shapeshifting, run super fast, speed, talk to animals, the ability to teleport, and mind reading. Very interesting there. So I'll come up with a new poll question pretty soon here. It'll probably show up on Lecture 8. Looking forward to hearing those answers. I hope that you have a great weekend. Stay safe and healthy. Praying for you guys. Take care.